In this tutorial, we will build on the previous tutorial by introducing the Ellipse tool, the Line Segment tool, image hierarchy, and the eyedropper. In designing the background for our image, we had no need to rearrange the order in which we drew objects. In Illustrator, whatever you draw is drawn above everything that you have previously drawn. And that's one of the things we're going to really focus on in this aspect. So we're going to be drawing this monkey face. I'd like you to take a moment and open up your background. Once you've done that, go ahead and open a new file. We're going to call this one monkey face. If you are on one of the computers in the computer lab at school, all of your settings will have changed. If you're on your own machine, hopefully your settings have stayed from the previous time you created a new document. Make sure that you have your profile, start out by setting your profile to web, and make sure your width and height are both set to 1000 pixels, and that your raster effects are set to medium, 150 ppi, and your color mode should be RGB. And then hit OK. All right, so we've got this new file open, and we're going to do a little experimentation with a new tool. Then we will go ahead and start drawing our actual monkey. So the first thing we need to do is we need to access the Ellipse tool. The Ellipse tool is in the exact same location as the rectangle tool. Any of the tools over here that have a little tiny white arrow in the bottom right corner means that if you click and hold on the tool, it will open up a submenu that allows you to choose other options, right? So we have a rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, and star tool, and this other thing called the flare tool, which drives me totally insane. But we'll talk about that later. So the Ellipse tool, the letter L, is the quick key for it, is what we're going to use. So we're going to grab the Ellipse tool, and you'll notice that once you've chosen another tool, it becomes the top tool in that tool bin, right? So now if I was to be using my mouse to go back and forth, I wouldn't have to click and hold on the rectangle, move to the ellipse every single time. I can just click on the Ellipse tool, so it speeds things up a little bit. The controls are exactly the same as with the rectangle. So if I just click and drag, I'm going to get an ellipse of any dimension that I want, right? If I click, drag, and hold down Shift, it'll make a circle, right? Which is just an ellipse of equivalent X and Y dimensions. And if I hold down Shift and Option, or Alt if you're in Windows, and click and drag, it'll pull the ellipse out from the center, right? I don't think we went over that with the rectangle, we just talked about it in scaling. But when you're drawing something, if you hold down Shift and Option, it does pull out from the center to draw the new ellipse. Now, I've got these three ellipses, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to draw actually one more circle. You can either hold down Shift or Shift and Alt/Option, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter if you're drawing from the center or from the corner. But so I want 3 circles, and we're going to delete this other ellipse that I've drawn. So I'm going to hit the letter V to grab my selection tool. And you'll see that by default, whatever I drew last is the first thing that it selects. I don't want to delete that, so I'm going to click once up here and delete this. Now, you'll notice each of these ellipses is drawn on top of one another. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to make it so that all 3 of these overlap with one another, right? So this ellipse is overlapping both of the other circles and vice versa, right? Essentially a 3-way Venn diagram. And what we're going to do is we're going to change each of these colors of the fill, right? We're going to leave the stroke alone for now. But so let's go ahead and make one of these cyan. We'll make one of these yellow. And we'll make the last one magenta, right? So we have cyan, right? These 3 colors stand out from one another quite boldly. So that's why we're using them. And so we've got our 3 colors here. Now, let's say, all right, I've got these 3, I've drawn them in this order, but I really want this little magenta one to be on top of the cyan and the yellow one. But currently it's underneath both of them. And so in order to make changes to the order in which objects are set up in the document, I can right-click on the magenta object. And this opens a little menu, a drop-down menu, that allows me to do several things pretty quickly. First, I can hover over Arrange, and you'll see I have the option to bring it to the front, bring forward, send backward, or send to back. So I'm going to click on Bring to Front, because that's what I want to do. When I bring it to the front, suddenly it is now on top of both of the other objects. Now let's say instead of being on top of all of the other objects, actually I want it to be above the yellow but below the cyan. Right, so what I'm going to do is I can right click on this, I can hit Arrange, and I can say Send Backward. Right, and what that's going to do is it's going to send it backward one level. Right, it's going to put it below whatever the object I drew before this. It's going to go under that. Right, so now I have this object in between the cyan and the yellow ellipses or circles. So now let's say I actually want to send it all the way to the back. I can either at this point say Send Backward, right, because it's only one level behind the back. Or if I want to say, oh, now I say, actually I want this cyan one to be in the back, I can right click on this, go to Arrange, and say Send to the back. Now, this works really, really well if I can easily select each one of these elements, and if I only have a few objects that I'm working with. Right? If I had, and this does happen, if I had, say, 100 different objects in my drawing, and I wanted it to be 50 objects below where I drew it, right? I'm going to have to hit that key combo or go through that thing 50 times in order to do this. In order to illustrate, why there's another way that works better in a lot of options, let's go ahead and draw one more ellipse that's going to cover up all three of these. It's going to be big and it's going to surround all three of them. So I'm just going to start somewhere where it looks like it might be the center of those three objects. I'm not super concerned. I'm going to hold down Option, I'm going to hold down Shift, I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to make sure that this circle envelops all three of those other circles. All right, so now if I use my selection tool, I could send this to the back, right? I could just right click on this, say Select, say Arrange, Send to Back. But we're gonna look at a different way to do this. If I go over to my panels here on the right side of the screen, the very last one is the Layers panel. If I click on this, this is going to show me the image hierarchy, right? Basically the order in which everything is drawn in the image. And to start with, I just have something called Layer 1, and all I can see in the little thumbnail here is this big blue circle. What I need to do is I need to click on this white arrow that's next to it, and that's a drop-down arrow, right? So now I can see everything that's on this layer. And something else to note is whatever has this dark blue square on it means that this is the selected artwork, right? So if I click on this, it will select it. So if I want to select the yellow one, what's nice about the Layers menu is I can, even though I can't see it, I can actually select it underneath this blue rectangle, or sorry, this blue circle. I can go down and I can keep clicking. Now, in order to select things, I have to click over here beyond to the right of this dark line here, right? I can click here, I can click here, as long as if I'm not clicking here. You'll notice if I click here, it changes this into blue highlighting, but it doesn't actually select the object in my artwork. Now, so I can select things here. Now something else I can do, let's go ahead and select the yellow circle for now. But what I want to do is I want to move this sky blue circle down to the bottom of the image, right? This big sky blue one. And so what I can do is if I click here so it's highlighted in blue, even without selecting it, I can click and drag and pull this down to the bottom of the Layers panel, and suddenly I've moved it to the back, right? So I can also grab the magenta one, I can pull it up top, I can grab the teal one, or sorry, the cyan one here, I can bring it to the middle. I also have the ability to turn on and off the visibility of different elements. I can even turn the visibility of the whole layer off if I wanted to. If you've ever used Photoshop, several of these controls are very, very similar. So now what I want to show you is what a group looks like in the Layers panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down, we're going to select one of these objects, hold down Shift, and select the other two small circles. Right, so we just want those three circles selected. We don't want this fourth one. If you've accidentally selected this, you'll see the bounding box gets huge. In order to deselect that, all I have to do is hold down Shift, click once, and it will remove that one object from the selection. So I've got these three objects selected, and let's go ahead and make a group. So I can either hit Control G in Windows or Command G on the Mac. And in the Layers menu, you'll now see that I have this object called Group and another object called Path. Now, if you can imagine having 100 different things called Group and Path, that's going to get really hard to determine what is what exactly, right? These thumbnails help, but in a lot of times you're going to soon find out as you start designing artwork, the thumbnails are not very useful at all. So what I need to do is I need to name these things. So if I click and then double click on the word path, I can change this to background. And I can change this group name to, let's just call it cluster, right? It's just a synonym for group, but whatever. So now you'll notice that much like the layer here, where I have the drop-down arrow that allows me to see the independent elements of the layer, I can also click on the drop-down menu for drop-down arrow for the cluster, for this group. And I can actually independently select these and drag them around. Right? I can also, you'll notice all of them are selected right now. But I can also click on independent ones and select them individually. This allows me to not need to do the double click to come in here and say, let's make the stroke weight on this thing 12 points, right? So I can come in here and without entering isolation mode and doing all of that, I can come in here and make changes to these different objects independently, or change their order, or turn the visibility of one of them off or on. Right? Okay, so that's what groups look like in layers. Now, layers are really nice because it allows us to organize our work on top of allowing us to have the ability to really arrange the objects in our images as we'd like. One last thing that we need to talk about is what a group looks like in isolation mode. So if we have the Layers menu open, and I just click off in space somewhere, and then click once on the group and double click so I enter isolation mode, you'll see it's telling me I'm in isolation mode up here, which is what this gray bar means. And it also tells me here in Layers, it says, hey, you're in isolation mode for this group, right? And so it's just another way to let you know where you are and what you've done. So I don't need to do anything in here. Or maybe what I should do is I should select this one object here, and I'm going to change the stroke weight to something like 80 points, right? So it's absolutely enormous. Now there's one last tool that we need to look at before we're ready to start drawing our monkey face, and that's the line segment tool. The line segment tool is pretty simple to use. And the tool icon is this diagonal line over here. I'm going to click on this. The way you work with the line segment tool is you click at one point and you drag to another, and it creates a straight line. Now, currently it has an 80-point stroke because I changed that. I'm going to change this down to something like 6 points. Maybe we'll do 12 points. That'll make it a little bit more visible. Right? So the line segment tool allows me to draw line segments. What it does not allow me to do is draw a contiguous, and I'm just going to create 4 line segments here, right? Even though it's snapping to this anchor point, what it doesn't allow me to do is draw a shape that I can fill in with a color. If you want to zoom in and out on an image, like you need to get closer in to do some detail work, you can either hit Command or Control plus and minus to zoom in and out. You can use the zoom tool by hitting the letter Z or clicking over here. And one nice thing about the zoom tool is you can click and drag to zoom into a very specific spot. Right? So something you're going to notice is the corners on this look awful. And that's because we have 2 independent line segments coming together at a point. And that's not ever going to make a shape. Right? I've had lots of issues with students in the past trying to use the line segment tool to make other artwork, to make a solid shape, and it never ends well. It's a lot of wasted time and effort. So something else, if you want to quickly zoom back in so you can see the entire image on your screen, all you do is you hold down Command or Control and hit the 0 key. And that will recenter your artboard in the window. So the line segment tool, pretty simple to use. However, it is literally just for drawing line segments and not shapes. So even though we've made all of this awesome work, let's go ahead and select it all and delete it so we can start drawing our monkey face. So I'm going to hit Command or Control A to select everything, and then hit delete. Now, what I would like to do is, before we start drawing this monkey face, I want to bring the background in. And to do that, I'm going to click on my, you'll see that I have a couple tabs open, right? This is the in process. This is what we're going to get to today, or by the end of this tutorial. And so I have the in process. I also have the background. So if I just click on these tabs, that allows me to go between the different images. And so what I can do to bring this image into the monkey face is I can actually, if I have the layers menu open, I can click in the selection area here to the right hand side of this dark bar, and I can select the entire layer. I could also hit Command or Control A to select everything in here, and then Command or Control C to copy. And once I've copied this, I can click on the monkey face. I can hit Command V to paste. And it will center this on the artwork, right? The images are exactly the same dimensions, and so it just plopped it in right in the center. So now I have this layer, and I don't want to be drawing the monkey face in the same layer because then it's going to get really confusing and hard to work with. This is the background, so I can change the layer names as well. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change layer 1 to background, and I'm going to close this drop-down arrow. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom of this pane, and I'm going to create a new layer. It's the image of the sheet of paper with the page folded over. So I'm going to create a new layer. This is layer 2. You'll notice that there's this sky blue line here that matches the color of the bounding boxes. This red line here means that anything we draw on layer 2 is going to be bound in a red box. Okay? And so layer 2, let's just double click on the name, and we're just going to start by calling it monkey. Right? Not mankey, monkey. Okay. And so then I'm going to hit the lock button next to the visibility, right? I can turn the visibility on and off. There's also the ability to lock a layer. This means that I won't accidentally select the background layer while I'm trying to draw or make something or select something in the monkey's face, right? So I can leave the background there. I can also turn the visibility off. And in this case, I'm going to shut it off just so we have a clean blank slate. It's still there, but we're going to be working on layer 1. Oh, and make sure that if I have this background selected, highlighted in blue, and I go to draw something, it's going to tell me that I can't. I get this little icon of a pencil and a no symbol, right? And that's because the layer that I have selected is locked. So what I need to do, and it's invisible. Both of those things will make it so you can't draw on the layer. So I'm actually going to need to select this, right? Make sure this is highlighted in blue. And now if I try to draw an ellipse, you'll see that I get an ellipse and that the bounding box for the ellipse is red. I'm going to undo that ellipse. Now what we need to do is we need to start using the ellipse tool. So if you haven't selected it already, please do so. And we're going to draw a circle that is 700 pixels by 700 pixels. And I'm going to start by putting this just dead center in the image. So I'm going to hover over the center point until it says center in green. I'm going to hold down Shift and Option. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to pull this thing out until it's pretty close to 700 pixels. All right? It's pretty close, 700.62 pixels. I'm going to release the button, and you'll see up here I could change this to 700, but for what we're doing, it doesn't matter that it's 0.6 of a pixel bigger than it should be. Since I drew this in the center, now we need to draw the mouth, right? I'm going to keep referring to this, right? So I've got this circle. And now I need to draw the mouth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this bottom anchor point. I'm going to hold down Shift and Option. I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to draw this until it is 360 by 360. Now, I'm having issues actually seeing that. Here we go. You'll note that there's 359. That's pretty close to 360. Now, something you're going to notice is that for whatever reason, I can't see any of the artwork that I've just drawn, right? I can hover over it and the highlight shows up, but I can't see anything. And if you notice, that's because both of these paths, the path and the fill, is totally blank. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to definitely turn on the outlines for this object. And then because I forgot to do so for the face, I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter V or select the dark arrow at the top. And I'm going to move my mouse slowly until I'm hovering over the path. Now you'll notice when you don't have any fill at all, the only time you can select a path is when you're right on top of it. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to change the stroke to black. Okay, now everything should be good. I can continue drawing what I'm working on. And you'll notice that these have no fill, right? There's no fill there, which is why I can see the stroke underneath the other object. And we'll change that in a bit, but first we're just going to keep drawing these circles. Now we need to draw a couple ears, and we're just going to draw 2 more ellipses that are 130 pixels on a side. Something else you can do to quickly draw something to the exact dimensions you want, you can hold down Option, and if you just Option click once instead of clicking and dragging, it will open up a little window here that asks you what size do you want these dimensions to be. And so I'm going to say 130 by 130. I'm going to hit OK. And boom, I've drawn a circle. Now, I could come over here and do the exact same thing. In fact, if I hover over this anchor point, hold down Option, click once, you'll see that it's already filled in to be 130 by 130 pixels. I can hit OK. That makes this option work really quickly, and it speeds up my productivity. So now we need to draw a nose. And in order to draw the nose, we're going to draw a 90 pixel by 90 pixel nose right on top of the snout here. So I'm going to hold down Option, click, change this to 90, change this to 90. And again, you can hit Tab to tab between the different things, right? To highlight these different things. So I hit 90, Tab, 90, and I can hit Tab and then hit OK. Right, and I've drawn the nose of this monkey. And now I need to draw eyes. Those are going to be 120 by 120 pixels. And we want them to be in line, right, with the ears, right? Ears and eyes are aligned horizontally. Now, we're first going to draw one eye, and then we're going to use some other transforms in order to duplicate that eye and get it to be aligned on the other side of the face. So it's going to save us some work. So I'm going to hold down Option, click once. I'm going to make this 120 pixels, Tab, 120, Tab, Tab. And then, so anything that's highlighted in orange is the box that you're currently on, right? So here I'm going to be able to edit this. Here I'll be able to edit this. Here I would cancel the action if I hit Enter, and here I will set the action, right? So I've created an eye. What I need to do to create the other eye and make sure it's at the same location relative to the head is that I need to change the center point. These are the transform tools, right? There's rotate, there's scale, and there's several options under each of them. So I'm going to click under rotate. And under rotate, I have the option to reflect. So I'm going to select the reflect tool. Now, it's going to be hard to see, and so I'm going to zoom in a touch here, right? But there's this little blue crosshair that shows up, this cyan crosshair. That crosshair indicates the center around which this is going to reflect. If I was to reflect this right now, all it's going to do is flip the circle over right on top of itself, and I won't see any change whatsoever. If I had a shape that was more irregular, you would notice the difference right away. But with the circle, it would look like nothing is happening. And so what I need to do is I need to tell it, where do I want it to reflect? What point do I want it to reflect around? In this case, I want it to reflect around the center of the monkey's face. So if I float over here with my mouse until the center pops up, and I hold down the Option key and click once, the first thing it's going to do, you'll notice, is that it moves that center point here. Now, as I zoom out, you'll be able to see what you should already see on your screen, which is this reflect option. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I click preview, right? And oh, lo and behold, if I check and uncheck preview, I get another eye that's equidistant from the center of the head. I don't want to just reflect this object. I actually want to copy it and then reflect it. And so what I need to do is I'm going to preview this just so I know 100% sure where this is going to go. As a note, I could also do this horizontally, but again, right, it's horizontal in the center, so it's just flipping this circle over on itself, right? The only way we're really going to notice the difference right now is vertical, or if we were to choose an angle, right, which we can click and drag in here, and we can reflect this really anywhere around this circle, which is not what we want to do. We want to do 90 degrees. And so instead of hitting OK, I'm going to hit copy. And what that does is it leaves the original object in place, and it reflects a copy of the object where you want it. So if I click that, boom, I have two eyes. They're centered around the bridge of the nose, just like they should be on a normal monkey's face. All right, so now that we've created these shapes, we need to modify them a bit, we need to move them around a little bit, and we need to start coloring them. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to apply color and stroke to these different shapes. And to do that, I am going to go and I'm going to make sure I select an object. So I'm going to use my selection tool or hit the letter V on the keyboard. And rather than starting with the eyes, I'm going to start with the head. And remember, if there's no fill set whatsoever, you actually have to click on the path to select the object. And so now I'm going to change this. And so everyone has the same colors. I'm actually going to go back to this image, select it, and then double click here. This is the color info that you want, right? And I'll repeat this and I'll show you how to grab the color picker and everything else here in a second. This lists every single possible way you can describe color to a computer. There's CMYK, it tells you how much percentage of each is here. There's RGB here, and those values range from 0 to 255 in each of those three channels. There's hue, saturation, and brightness, which we're not going to use. And this is what would be called, this is hexadecimal. It's web colors. If you've done any website stuff at all, most of the color information tends to be listed in this format, right? This just allows you to have one number rather than fill in three fields. So I'm going to copy and paste this because I have it. Once I do that, I'm going to give you guys time to copy those numbers down and also say them out loud. So I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to go back to this monkey face image. And what I'm going to do, rather than going up to the swatches, right, which is going to give me a predetermined color, I'm actually going to come down here to where it says fill X, right? And I'm going to double click on this. Now, I do want to make sure that I have the object, this object selected, or else I'm going to color something totally wrong. In my case, I'm going to paste this in here. So I'm going to hit Command V to paste it. But for everyone watching at home, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see that this is 8C6239. Feel free to pause the video. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to hit OK. And boom, I have a brown monkey face. Obviously, nothing else is colored yet, but I've got this brown monkey face. So I'm also going to change the stroke weight. And the stroke weight I'm going to set it to 6 points. All right, so I have this pretty thick, heavy line and this green face. Now, there's other parts of this monkey that are going to be the same color, but not right now. Really, right now, the only thing that's going to match is going to be this little circle here. So I'm going to click on this little circle so it's selected, and then I'm going to use a tool called the Eyedropper Tool that allows me to grab the appearance, the stroke and fill values from one object and apply it to a new object. And that tool is located over here. It's this thing that looks like an eyedropper. Also, the letter I is the quick key for this. So I'm going to grab the eyedropper, and with the object that I want to color selected, I'm going to click on the object whose color I want to sample. And boom, I have a heavyweight line and a dark brown nose. Now I need to create the ears and the mouth are more of a peach skin tone. And so in order to do that, I'm going to come back here to my reference image, and I'm going to select one of these areas. I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to grab this color information quickly, and then I'm going to select one of these other areas, double click on the fill. I'm going to paste it in, and then again I'm going to zoom in so that you can see what those values are and give you a moment to copy it down. Again, it's EAB59B. All right, I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to set this color to the color that I want. And now I just need to change the stroke weight to 6 points, right, so that it matches the stroke weight of the other stuff. And now I can use the eyedropper tool to add this color to the ears. And instead of doing the ears one at a time, I'm actually going to click on one ear, I'm going to hold down Shift, click on the other ear, and then use the letter I, or go back over and click on the eyedropper tool and select this object. And so now I have 2 pink ears, a brown nose, a pink mouth, and a brown head. Now the eyes we need to color as well. So I'm actually going to select both of the eyes together. So I'm going to select one, hold down Shift, select the other. And then I will change the fill color to white because these are going to be the whites of the eyes. And I'm going to change the stroke weight to 6 points. Okay, so now I need to draw in the pupils of the eye, and then we're going to need to arrange some of these other parts. So first I'm going to use the Ellipse tool again. Again, the quick key for the Ellipse tool is the letter L. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to hover over the center of the eye. I'm going to hold down Shift and Option, and I'm going to pull out a big pupil here. Right, this monkey's a little crazy, so he's got the crazy eye. So I'm going to make one of the pupils really big and one of the pupils much smaller. And then once I have both pupils drawn, I'm going to use the letter V to grab my selection tool, and I'm going to hold down Shift so I have both of them selected, and I'm going to change the fill color to black. All right. So now we have a monkey with some crazy eyes. His eyes are pretty wide set. We might scoot those in closer to the center, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But first, let's get the nose and the ears arranged correctly, right? If we look at this monkey in process, one, these eyes are much closer together, and they're actually much larger, so we'll make some changes there. And these guys, I believe I also changed the shape of, but we'll do that in just a second. First, we're going to arrange stuff. So let's go ahead and come back here. This monkey looks really like he's got fetal alcohol syndrome. Okay, so we could grab our ears and go through and arrange things, but that's not going to work out very friendly. So what we want to do is we want to grab the Layers panel. And with the Layers panel, we want to click on the drop-down arrow for the monkey layer. And you'll see we've got 3 peach objects here, and we don't know exactly which one of those is the ear and which is the mouth, but we know that we want them to be behind the head. And we also have 2 brown dots, right? One indicator of what is if I zoom in on this a little bit, you can see that the outline on 2 of these is much heavier and darker than on the third. That's an indicator of the scale of this object, right? This thinner outline that's barely visible on this third one down here means that it's probably larger, right? The stroke, as far as the full scale of this thing, is much less of it than it is for the ears. And the same goes for the nose versus the head, right? So that's one visual way we could do that. We can also just click the selection tool or click on the objects themselves and say, oh, this is the ones that I want, right? So I can, if I was to click on this ear and then hold down Shift and click on this ear, I can say, okay, these are the 2 ears. Now, just with those selected, I can't click and drag both of them at the same time. But if I click here, right, it's highlighted in blue, and if I hold down Shift and click here, I can highlight both of these in blue, and then I can drag them down so they're below the head, right? And now the ears are placed behind the head. I can do the same thing with the nose, right? So I can click on this, I can make sure that is indeed the nose by selecting it, And then I can pull and drag this down, and I don't need it to go behind the head. I just want it to go below the mouth, right? So now, if I click off of this, I've got the nose, I've got the ears, I've got the eyes, right? And this monkey head is not looking so hot right now. First, these objects aren't quite where they need to be. They need to be higher up on the face. The ears stick out way too far, and they're a little bit too perfectly circular. And the eyes are much too far spread apart, and they're not quite big enough. And the same goes for the ears. I'd like these to be larger features on the face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making some of those modifications. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to squish the nose a bit. All right, so in order to squish the nose, I'm going to select it. And then I'm going to hover over one of these. It could be the top or the bottom one here. And I can pull this down, and what it's going to do is, right, it's going to pull the center down as well, right? It's going to be adjusting it with this opposite side pinned to the screen. So what I really want to do is hold down Option or Alt, and then click and drag, and it'll shrink around the center there, right? And so, you know, that looks a little bit more like a monkey nose. Maybe I went a little too far. Maybe I need to pull them up just a touch, right? But having it be a little bit flatter than a round circle makes it look a lot nicer. But in fact, maybe I even do want to have this come down a little bit lower, but we'll work on that in just a second. So then the ears and the eyes, right? They're all a little bit small, but I'd like them to be larger. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift and select both ears. I'm going to hold down Option so the ears stay centered. But if I hit Option before, or if I hit Option, I grab where I would normally grab to stretch one ear, you'll see that what it actually does is it makes it so that I create a copy of those. Now, this could be some weird genetically mutated monkey that has 4 ears, but let's leave him with just 2 ears for the time being. So I'm going to hit Command or Control Z to undo that. And I'm actually going to go to the center of those two objects. And I'm going to hold down Option or Alt in order to stretch equally on the top and the bottom from the center. And I want to make this height, you know, somewhere around 160 pixels, right? Make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to do the same thing for the eyes. I'm going to hold down Shift, right? And with these, however, if I was to hold down Option and stretch these out and hold down Shift, it's actually going to pull the eyes further and further out on the sides of the face, which I don't want to do. They're already too far apart. And yes, you get this totally ridiculous, goofy looking monkey if you do that, which makes me kind of want to leave these guys like they are, but you guys can put the pupils wherever you want to once we get done with this. So currently I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to actually need to scale these independently of one another, right? And so again, if I get this crazy dark highlight, that's not what I want either. I'm just going to deselect everything, click on one of them, and now I know that I set this to about 160 pixels. So in these, I'm going to set these to about 150 pixels. And so what I can do is I can come up to the control panel at the top of the page and just set these values here and just hit 160. And then when I do that in one field, it should automatically fill it in the other. And I'm going to do the same thing with this other eye. Now you'll notice I don't actually take the time to fill in the PX. It automatically knows what I want. It knows what units it's using, and it will do that for me. So I'm just going to say 160. Boom, much larger eyes. I'm going to make this pupil larger. I'm going to leave that one small just so the disparity is much more obvious. And again, I need to hold down Shift and Option to make this scale out from the center. All right, there we go. That's looking a lot better. And then what I want to do is I want to grab the mouth and the nose because they're too low on the face, right? I would really like this to be higher up. I want the nose to be sitting somewhere about here, right? If you imagine, if you actually look at a monkey face, granted this is a cartoon monkey, but if you look at a monkey face, the nose is not that far away from its eyes, you know, for most species. And so there's a couple ways I can move this. I can either click and drag on this. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to nudge an object, right? So if I just tap it, if I tap the up arrow, it's moving it one little smidgen of space at a time. If I press and hold, it'll actually automatically kind of dry up. Now this is really a useful way to make very nice minuscule movements, right? Sometimes it's hard, especially if you have snapping turned on. for you to be able to drag something really precisely, right? So nudging allows you to very precisely move these different parts. So I'm starting to get something that looks more like a monkey face. What I would like to do, however, is I do want the eyes to be a little bit closer to center. I'm going to double check my other image. Yeah, you can see that the eyes are much closer to the center of the head. I'd say this monkey's head's a little bit too big. And these eyes, you know, maybe they just need to be a little lower, or maybe the mouth needs to be a little bit higher. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the mouth up just a touch. And I'm going to bring the eyes in just a smidgen as well. But this time, rather than using the nudging it where I want it to go, I'm going to set it where I want it to go, right? In the top left-hand corner, this is where x equals 0 and y equals 0. Currently, we're at x equals 640. X is the horizontal direction, y is the vertical direction, and y, we're dead center in the image. We're 500 pixels down from the top, and we're 640 pixels from the side. And so let's say we actually want this to be 10 pixels closer to the center. So we're going to say, okay, we want this to actually be 630 pixels, right? So we're going to scoot that guy over. Now we're going to select both the eye and the iris here, and it's saying that it's 359. Now with this, we want it to be plus 10, right? So it needs to be 369, right? And so now our eyes are a little bit closer to the center of the face. We've got our nose, we've got our mouth, and now all we need to do is we need to draw the line segment that's going to define the seam between the lips on the monkey's face. And to do that, we're going to grab our line segment tool, and we're going to hover over here until we are aligned with the center of the mouth. And I'm just going to start arbitrarily here. I'm going to click and drag, and with snapping I can either just click and drag and let it snap where I want it, or I could hold down Shift, and that will force it to draw either at a horizontal at a 45-degree angle or at a 90-degree angle, right? And I'm going to make this somewhat centered, hopefully, in the mouth. It doesn't really matter for this image where that line goes. Maybe the lips should be a little bit lower, but I'm going to leave them right where they are for now. All right. And so this concludes the basics of drawing the monkey's face. So now let's go ahead and turn the visibility on for our background. So if you don't have the layers panel open, go ahead and click on the layers panel and turn the visibility back on for the background. And boom, we now have this crazy monkey head in front of some colorful background, and it's really looking bland and boring, but the next set of tutorials is going to begin to modify the monkey face in order to give it a lot more character. And in doing so, we're going to explore several more tools. So in review, in this set of tutorials, we've learned how to use the rectangle tool, how to use the ellipse tool, how to use the line segment tool. We've learned a little bit about how the file hierarchy works in Illustrator. We've made groups. We've dabbled with blending mode, opacity, and we've also used the eyedropper to allow us to grab the appearance of one object and transfer it to the appearance of another object.